In 2025, the world spent $3 trillion buying oil. Not euros, not gold, not crypto, dollars. And here's the thing nobody teaches you in school. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because of a secret deal struck in a Saudi desert in 1974. An arrangement so quietly powerful that 50 years later, it still decides which countries prosper, which ones get sanctioned, and which ones get invaded. This is the petrodollar, the most important financial system you've never been taught. To understand how it was built, you first need to understand how badly America needed it. August 15th, 1971. Richard Nixon sits in front of a television camera and quietly detonates the global financial order. He announces that the United States is ending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. No more gold for dollars. Done. Over. Window shut. To understand why that was terrifying, you need to go back a little further. After World War II, the world needed a new financial system. Currencies were worthless. Trade had collapsed. So the major powers sat down in a small New Hampshire town called Bretton Woods and agreed on something elegantly simple. The dollar would be the world's reserve currency. Every other currency would be pegged to it. And the dollar itself would be backed by gold at $35 per ounce, fixed and guaranteed. Any country holding American dollars could walk up and trade them in for gold. America promised, and for a while it worked beautifully. Then America started spending money it didn't have. Wars, a space race, social programs, Cold War muscle flexing on every continent. To fund all of it, the printing press ran hot. More dollars flooded the world than America had gold to back them. Foreign governments started noticing. France noticed. Germany noticed. They began showing up at the window asking for their gold back, and the pile was shrinking fast. So Nixon did the only thing he could. He closed the window and called it a temporary suspension, which is the financial equivalent of saying, "I'll pay you back, I promise," while already reversing out of the driveway. The dollar was now backed by nothing but confidence. And confidence, as any economist will admit after 2 drinks, is a fragile foundation. Then things got dramatically worse. October 1973. Egypt and Syria launched a surprise military offensive against Israel on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. America backed Israel hard, airlifting weapons directly into the conflict. OPEC, the Arab oil-producing nations, responded with the most brutally effective weapon available to them. They cut production and placed an embargo on the United States. The price of oil exploded from $3 a barrel to nearly $12. Gas stations ran dry. Lines stretched around city blocks. In the richest country on earth, people were rationing fuel like it was wartime. So to summarize where America stood in late 1973, a currency untethered from gold, inflation rising like a fever, and the world's most essential commodity being used as a weapon pointed directly at the American economy. Henry Kissinger flew to Saudi Arabia with a proposal that was equal parts brilliant and pragmatic. "Your Majesty," he essentially said, "you are sitting on the largest oil reserves on the planet. That is extraordinary. It also makes you an extraordinarily attractive target. You are surrounded by neighbors with ambitions and armies, enormous wealth, limited protection. So here is what America is offering. You price your oil exclusively in US dollars. You take your surplus revenue and park it back in American Treasury bonds, back inside the American financial system. And in return, America guarantees your security. We sell you weapons, we protect your fields. We make it very clear to anyone with aggressive intentions that they will be dealing with us first." In 1974, Saudi Arabia said yes. The rest of OPEC fell into line shortly after. And just like that, the petrodollar was born. Now here is where it gets genuinely elegant. Because the genius of the system wasn't simply that oil had to be purchased in dollars, although that alone was enormous. The genius was the loop it created. Think of it in 3 steps. Step 1. Oil is priced in dollars globally, which means Japan needs dollars to buy oil. Germany needs dollars. India needs dollars. Every country on the planet that runs on energy, which is every country on the planet, needs a constant supply of US dollars just to keep the lights on. America engineered permanent global demand for its own currency without selling a single barrel of oil itself. Step 2. Oil exporting nations are now swimming in surplus dollars, more than they can possibly spend at home, so those dollars flow back to America into U.S. Treasury bonds, American banks, and Wall Street. This became known as petrodollar recycling. The world buys oil in dollars, the oil money returns to America, and America uses that capital to fund its own government while keeping borrowing costs low. It's a loop, self-reinforcing, and extraordinarily profitable. Step 3. America uses the recycled money to fund the military that protects the oil fields that keep the oil flowing in dollars that come straight back to America. The loop continues to feed the machine. By the 1980s, it was running at full power. The dollar's share of global reserves climbed above 70%. U.S. Treasury bonds became every government's favorite safe asset. American financial markets became the gravitational center of global capital. Economists called it America's exorbitant privilege, a polite academic phrase meaning America could borrow cheaply, spend beyond its means, and quietly export a portion of its inflation onto everyone else, and nobody could do a thing about it. But the system had a second layer that made it truly extraordinary. The dollar wasn't just the world's currency, it was the world's financial infrastructure. Global trade, international banking, cross-border debt, foreign exchange. It all ran through the dollar, which meant getting cut off wasn't inconvenient. It was catastrophic. America had turned its currency into a weapon more precise than any bomb. It was called sanctions. Play by the rules, or we switch off your access to the global economy. And for countries that tried to step fully outside those rules, a pattern emerged that became difficult to ignore. In 2000, Saddam Hussein announced Iraq would begin selling oil in euros rather than dollars. 3 years later, American and coalition forces invaded. After Saddam fell, Iraqi oil returned to dollars. Muammar Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed African currency in 2009, the gold dinar, designed to replace the dollar in African oil trade. He had roughly 143 tons of gold ready to back it. In 2011, NATO intervened in Libya. Gaddafi was killed. The gold dinar was never mentioned again. Venezuela, sitting on the largest proven oil reserves on Earth at 303 billion barrels, launched a state-backed cryptocurrency in 2018 designed to sidestep dollar-denominated sanctions. It went nowhere. American sanctions intensified. Were these interventions purely about the dollar? Probably not entirely. Each had its own tangle of politics and regional complexity, but the pattern, challenge the dollar system, meet a sudden and dramatic end, repeated often enough that it stopped looking like coincidence. For decades, the machine held firm. Then, in 2022, something cracked. When Russia invaded Ukraine, America froze nearly $300 billion of Russian foreign reserves and cut major Russian banks from the SWIFT payment network. It worked on Russia, but it sent a message to every other government on Earth. Your reserves are only yours as long as Washington agrees. That thought landed like a stone in still water, and the ripples are still spreading. China began quietly reducing its U.S. Treasury holdings from a peak of over $1.3 trillion towards $600 billion, buying gold instead. Russia and China pushed bilateral trade into yuan and rubles. Brazil and China settled transactions in their own currencies. India bought Russian oil in rupees. And Saudi Arabia, the country that built the petrodollar alongside America 50 years ago, publicly stated it was open to trading oil in other currencies. That was not a minor footnote. That was the original architect of the system questioning the blueprint. The numbers back it up. The dollar's share of global reserves has dropped from 72% in 2001 to under 58% today. Central banks added over 1,000 tons of gold to their vaults in 2024 alone, the highest level of accumulation on record. The Chinese yuan, essentially zero in global reserves a decade ago, now sits at roughly 2%. Small, yes, but the direction is unmistakable. And then there is the problem no financial deal can fix. The world is simply using less oil. 1 in 4 cars sold globally in 2025 runs on electricity. If oil becomes less essential, the system built around buying it starts losing its grip. The petrodollar was always a machine running on a very specific kind of fuel. To be clear, the dollar is not finished. It still dominates 88% of foreign exchange transactions and roughly half of all global trade invoicing. No single rival comes close to replacing it. Not the yuan, not gold, not any cryptocurrency. The machine is battered, but it is still running. What has changed is this. For the first time in 50 years, it has genuine competition. Not one giant challenger, but dozens of small ones chipping away from every direction. Every bilateral currency deal, every ton of gold added to a central bank vault, every oil transaction settled outside the dollar is a hairline crack in something that was once considered unbreakable. The petrodollar was built in a moment of genuine American desperation. A currency without gold, an oil embargo, and a world asking what the dollar was actually worth anymore. The answer Kissinger engineered in that Saudi desert was clever, durable, and ruthlessly effective. It bought America 50 years of financial supremacy. Whether it buys another 50 is the most important economic question nobody is asking out loud.